Welcome to Combat Theory Presents, a weekly podcast about all things martial arts, fight science, and combat sports. I'm your co-host, Sammy Ryan, and our latest episode starts now.
And just like that, we are recording on our very first episode of Combat Theory Presents. This week's episode we're going to call the McDojo Value Menu. Seated to my right is my lovely co-host, Sammy Ryan. Say hello, Sammy.
Hello, hello.
And to my left, on the left of your camera, is Robert Spazzy Mungillo. Say hello, Robert.
What's going on?
So today we're talking about all things martial arts on the first episode of our new Combat Theory podcast. Guys, what is up? How you feeling?
I'm very excited to finally be doing the podcast.
I'm getting used to this mic in my face the entire time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. This will probably end up being a complete travesty, but we'll go one by one. So, hopefully it's sometime in mid-March when you're watching this very first episode of the podcast, which is hopefully going to be a weekly podcast about all things martial arts. So today we wanted to kind of give you guys an overview and start talking about our personal martial arts experience and kind of just set the groundwork for what we're going to be talking about throughout the series, where we hope to do fight companions and do interviews with martial artists and athletes, and just talk about what's going on in the world of martial arts. But today we're talking about kind of the beginnings of martial arts. So first question we're going to talk about is, what is it to be a martial artist? What do you guys think? I sent an outline earlier, so you've seen the questions, right?
You did.
You want to see the outline again?
I'm still pondering it.
I'm looking at the outline right now.
What does it mean to be a martial artist?
So martial obviously means war. Art means that there's a systematic approach to learning, as everyone's like, oh, there was an outline? Yeah, there was an outline, guys. I know. Keeping it professional, 100%.
I did the homework.
You did the homework?
I did the homework. Yes, teacher.
I did the homework. Isn't that a TikTok video? It's like, I didn't understand the assignment.
I did the assignment. He
I think
understood
we have
the
very
assignment.
different For You pages.
Probably, right? Maybe not. I hope not. Sammy, what's your TikTok handle, Sammy?
At Sammy Ryan.
SAMIRYANNE.
Yes.
It's a lot of N's.
It's a lot of
2 N's to be indeed or indifferent.
Well, there's another Sammy Ryan. I'm the second most famous Sammy Ryan, and she has 2 I's in her name.
Why is she more famous than you?
2 eyes, bro.
The answer I was going to give is not safe for work.
Okay,
But
all
she
right.
also runs a clothing line.
She has a clothing line. That's exciting. She has a spicy site. Is that what you're going to say?
Well, we also have a clothing line.
We do.
Combat Theory.
God, we're going to edit this so much. It's so terrifying. Yeah. That's exciting. Okay, so martial arts. Well, we can start somewhere else. Robert, what got you into martial arts?
Honestly, man, I was like horrified to even tell my dad, but the fight that I saw was like in 2007 was Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin, and my dad was so excited. I was excited. The whole house was excited, and it took me like 3 years to tell my dad that's what I wanted to do after that. But really, it was that fight that kind of set the pace, and the WWF, WWE, Hulk Hogan type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you Ultimate Fighter Season 1. I think that's probably true with a lot of people that are your age, that they kind of discovered mixed martial arts from the Ultimate Fighter, and then they, whether it was immediate or it took some time, that's what got them into training.
Right.
Sammy, what got you into martial arts?
I began boxing, kickboxing when I was 15, I believe. I was a cheerleader. I was a competitive cheerleader and a gymnast.
Save the cheerleader, save the world.
Basically. But I had so many weird injuries that I had acquired from it. And I was also reaching a point where I couldn't handle a lot of the appearance-based pressure of it. I really enjoyed the intensity of the training. So I needed another outlet that was not going to be so focused on what I looked like. My grandpa had been a boxer, so I got nudged in that direction. And I think that paired with the fact that I've always been a huge obsessive nerd over fighting games and Dragon Ball Z, it kind of had this natural.
That's super interesting though, because you make your living by being, you do modeling and you have an internet following. So obviously that's very it's very based on the way that you look, right? But you felt
Right.
the pressure from cheerleading was just too much on that aspect, and you found martial arts instead because of that.
Well, here's the thing. When you're cheerleading, you'd be like throwing girls up in the air, and then you'd catch them. You get an elbow to the face, and my nose would be broken, and I'd have to like suck it up and smile and look pretty for another 2 hours.
Yeah.
If I got into fighting and I took an elbow to the face and broke my nose, I don't have to look pretty after I get hit. So it's like the same pain, but it's like less.
Okay, I'm with you. I get you. It's funny though, because I have a lot of young girls that come in that did other sports.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they did cheerleading or they did dance or something like that. And I'll hear from the moms like, well, this girl she's really strong,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like maybe she didn't fit the body type of what it meant to be a dancer or what it meant to be a cheerleader.
Mm-hmm.
But she excelled athletically,
Right.
and they kind of come into martial arts in a different way. You know, I have kind of a boring martial arts story. I think what is considered to be a boring martial arts story, because like most people, I'm a child of the 80s, so we're all like the same age basically. But I was a child of the 80s, right? So I was that atypical kid. I think this is the story that you're going to hear from any martial arts coach that grew up in the 80s, but I was a bullied kid that, you know, we were poor, we moved around a lot, and the Karate Kid was like the movie. And I was under the impression that if I learned karate, I would be like unstoppable. Like, these kids can't bully me anymore because I know like Mr. Miyagi and I can wax on, wax off, you know? And what's kind of funny is that in the 80s, martial arts schools had like first month free, or, you know, buy the uniform and you got the first month free. And it wasn't like today where you go in and you pay, you have to put a credit card on file, you have to do all this other stuff. In the 80s, they didn't really have that. And we were poor, so we would move around like constantly. Every 4 or 5 months, we'd move somewhere new. And I would find out where the new like karate school was in my neighborhood, and we would sign up, and I would do the 1 month free. And then my mom couldn't pay anymore, so I would quit. And then we would move somewhere in like 3 months, and I would just do it again. So I got really good at like that first month of karate. And then when I was like 15, 16, and I got my first like real job, started making money, I used some of that money to start paying for martial arts. So then I've been involved in martial arts, I would say, all my life, but, you know, in different aspects. But for me, I you know, again, I think this is kind of like the story that you hear from all coaches, is that martial arts like really changed my life in a fundamentally important way.
Now, that first school that you paid for, like, what kind of school was that? Was that karate? Was that kickboxing?
No, that was more of like a boxing school.
Boxing?
Yeah, it was a little more of a boxing school, like a boxing, and they had like 2 nights a week. They had like American style kickboxing, so you couldn't kick below the waist. But to be honest with you, I wasn't really serious about it until I got in my like early 20s, like maybe 20, maybe 19, maybe 20. And I moved to Miami, and I was working in Miami, and I got a job. And in the plaza, this is kind of funny, there was like a school that said martial arts. And I wasn't really interested then. You know, I had kind of stepped away from it, and I had lost interest in it. Because to be honest with you, I feel like a lot of the stuff that I had done in my teens, it didn't really feel practical to me. It didn't really feel real. And we'll talk about that later. But when I was, you know, I kind of lost the
That drive?
or the passion for it. I just didn't feel like, well, I'm learning stuff, and it's not really like,
It doesn't make money.
it's
right
not
now.
working. It's not
Yeah.
working. You know, it was like I would like, you know, learn like a technique, and then I couldn't use it, or I still felt afraid. Like, I'd get into confrontations and I'd feel afraid, you know, and I'd be like, oh, this didn't work, you know? And I moved to Miami. I was at a house party, and there was this guy's name's Dave. And I was talking to this guy who was friends with one of my friends, and he was like, oh yeah, I do martial arts at this school. You should check it out. You might like it. And it was literally the martial arts school in the plaza where I worked next to. And I was like, well, you know, that's like right next to me. Like, I should go check it out. And I went in and checked it out. I didn't even know what they did there. And they taught kickboxing. They taught like Filipino martial arts. And they had like submission wrestling. And And I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, I'll sign up for this, you know? And I fell, it became like this complete obsession of my life.
Just from like day one.
Day one, like I was that guy that I think everyone goes through that kind of early process, which I think leads us to where we were headed for our next question. Like, what does the early process of joining a martial arts school look like? And I think that's different for everyone. So I'm kind of curious to hear like what it was for you and what it was like for me. So Sammy, like when you first signed up, like were you at a smaller school? Where were you at? You don't have the name drop.
It was definitely a smaller suburban. Actually, no, it was a chain. Somewhere in the suburbs in Minnesota. And the first stage of my journey in my teens, I was really just doing it because I had a lot of energy that I needed to burn off. And it was this high intensity exercise. And then I kind of liked the fighting aspect as a huge nerd, because then I would apply it to, you know, whatever anime or game I was obsessed with. And also just as a cosplayer, being able to replicate certain moves and look cool was just beneficial for me in photos. But I went through like a very traumatic event in my life in early adulthood, and I moved to Florida right after it. And the very first week I moved to Florida is when I really got into the world of MMA, more modern combat sports, and I was completely hooked. I think going from, again, the suburbs of the Midwest to a city where there are so many professional fighters and organizations as well, it was such a different environment to be in, and there was a very different...
What made it different? Like that, was it just like more popular here, or?
It being more popular, but also people being more serious about it in training. So instead of
it being something like, hey, this is we I don't want to knock on karate, but like, hey, this is activity we do 1 hour a night.
Right.
Versus, okay, these are people, there's serious people here that
it's a lifestyle.
That are training 3 hours every morning. They're training 3-4 hours every night, and every weekend they're going to fights, and it's more of a lifestyle thing than an integral hobby in their day.
Right. It went from being a pastime to basically my entire life.
Yeah.
Almost overnight.
Was that a positive experience?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think, again, having gone through a time period when I had nothing else, I was able to immerse myself in this community. And I had something healthy to focus on mentally as well.
Sure. Robert, what do you think? What was from the time that you became interested in mixed martial arts to the time that you started training?
That was like really horrifying. Like, just because like I knew I had to tell my dad, I had to man up to tell my dad. It actually took me like 3 years to admit, like, hey, this is really what I want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really big. And when I told him, he's surprisingly supportive, right? I mean, you see him to this day.
Yeah.
Right? But like that was around 2009. So you know, I told my mom first. It was easier to tell my mom. My mom says, just go. Here's the waiver. We sign it. There was a school I had an idea of where I wanted to go to. Now, the funny part was, this girl I really liked in high school, I didn't like her boyfriend. Turns out he went there.
Okay, cool.
So we had this really weird relationship that we've developed where we were rivals.
Sure.
But he was the one to kind of bring me in.
Yeah.
And then we would go there almost every day and fight each other, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right? And fight each other. And I had a wrestling background, so I was always kind of winning. And I didn't quite understand jiu-jitsu aside from like, don't put my arm inside the guard, right? So like I was always kind of like winning exchanges with him. Now the turning point was when I went with like someone smaller than me, and this guy rocked my world completely.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, and like my eye was closed. I had like knots up here, right? And I mean back then,
yeah, it's not. Yeah, I'm with you.
It was dumb. We were just, that was training. And at that point, I was just so horrified. I was like, I need to know this
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, you sure you want to do this? I was like, I need to do this. And it was at that point my dad paid a full year. I was like, all right, just figure out how to get there. I didn't have a car. walk there, drive there, hitch a ride, take the bus, get there.
I can't imagine what it's like to not have a car.
I mean, back then I was coming out of high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's understandable, high school kid not having a car.
Yeah, 16 years old, just walking down 50.
Yeah.
I was like, that was it.
Solid. I'm with you on that
Yeah.
one. I think that I had like I guess I'm secretly nerdy, like I don't think I'm like openly admitting to being nerdy, but I guess I am right now. But I think I had I don't know, I think everyone kind of goes through this where when I first started training, I became obsessed with I want to know the history of what I'm doing and where does it come from and who came before me and why do they call it this and why do they call it that. And I remember like someone's about to sue me, but I remember like getting into like downloading a bunch of torrents of like like Shaolin monks training and like watching them do like these amazing feats and like reading about Buddhism, because if you're a martial artist, like maybe you need to be a Buddhist, and going to a temple, like there was a local Buddhist temple that I went and checked out in Miami because like I wanted to see what that was like. And trying to find I would go to Barnes and Noble. I would have like a break at work and I would go to Barnes and Noble. This is why they probably went out of business. And I would literally I'd like go to the martial arts section, sit on the floor and like go through all the books. And like I couldn't afford to buy them because I'm broke. And I would read all these books about, like different books that they were putting out, which were, hindsight being 2020, I still have some of them. Not great. They were not great. This is before YouTube. This is before like, these people were writing these essentially books that would have photos in black and white of them doing a technique, and you'd be trying to like figure it out, But I was absolutely obsessed, and then it's funny now because I think that as a coach, when new people come into the gym and they start training, I see them go through that like kind of same obsession period. And I generally find it to be annoying. I'm just like, oh, I hope he gets over this. I hope that he stops being so annoying right now.
Or it just becomes a phase.
Yeah.
Like wanting to do all the cool stuff.
Yeah, maybe. Or I think it just, again, there's a culture that's unique to martial arts. And I think that when you don't understand the culture, you have a lot of questions. And you're trying to figure out how I liken it to you start dating someone new and you go to their house for a holiday. You go to their family's house for a holiday. And they have these traditions and cultures. Like they celebrate Thanksgiving this way. They put up the tree this way. They celebrate Christmas this way. And I'm like I'm the new person, right? And like maybe the other sister's got a boyfriend. This is like his third or fourth Christmas, so he's like old hat now, And I'm like, where do I fit into this culture? And I'm trying to figure out who I am. And I think a lot of times that one of the things I want to do a future episode about and definitely talk more about is like navigating that martial arts culture, because I think that it can be a little intimidating and there are definitely like pitfalls that you can make in training or in just like, I don't want to say faux pas, but like kind of cultural mistakes that you make, which I'm not talking about like not bowing or not doing this. I'm talking about like generally just not understanding how to navigate the environment. I think we've talked about that individually. We've talked about that a lot.
I've always said like the first year of training, you're really just learning context more than anything else.
Yeah. Trying to figure out, I think that's probably true with anything new is the first few months, you're just trying to figure out like sustainability and trying to figure out like, how do I do this on a 5-day a week basis?
Right.
Like I have a newer girl that's been training with me, and her shoulder's been a little sore, and she was like, for the first like 2 weeks she was doing like 2-a-days, and her shoulder's been sore, and I'm like, yeah, it's okay to not come in every day. Like I'd like you here every day, but if your shoulder's sore and you're coming in twice a day, maybe you take one day where you only come in at night, or you come in and you have like a lighter day. That to me is sometimes I think really what creates the sustainability of training. Because if it's something you want to do forever, you have to figure out a way to sustain that forever.
You've also got to figure out how you navigate social dynamics and.
I mean, like a kid coming up in high school, like, I didn't know anything about social dynamic. You just show
Right.
up, right? You know, and just avoid that one kid in the room that wrecked me last week.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
The kid that smells bad.
right? That too.
I made so many faux pas my first 2 years of training.
Like cringe moments.
Very cringy moments, but a lot of it is no one says anything to you outright at the beginning. You kind of have to learn the hard way.
I hate to say that because truthfully, like as someone that's been in this game a long time, and because the retention rate, their turnover rate of people is pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like people don't. We said this the other day. Like you get a lot of new faces every month, and it can become daunting where you almost don't want to. You know, you don't want to invest a lot of energy in somebody new because
Right.
you know they might only show up
Might
for
leave.
3 weeks. You know what I mean? Or you get people that are super gun ho and they're really serious for like a month, and then after a month it's like they're gone. And you know, I'm pretty good about texting people afterwards, and I'll be like, hey, you know, I haven't seen you, where are you? Leave me on red, man. They break my heart every time, dude. You know, what do you think the some of the missteps or some of the initial mistakes that people make are?
Well, everyone walks into the gym thinking they're going to be the next UFC champion, and they want to butt heads with everyone else in the gym. They know better. They don't like to be told what to do. My favorite thing is, I think when I started at OBJJ, the gym we all train at, people would ask me how long I've been training, and I'll be like, oh, I've been training Muay Thai for almost 8 years. And then I'll be like, oh, how long have you been training? And they'll be like, 6 weeks. And I'll try to help out with the technique, and they always respond by criticizing me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's weird.
let's weigh
Yeah.
the hierarchy of, maybe I have
But that is
maybe I have more experience.
But then you demonstrate, and you're like, watch these.
yeah. No, but also I think that's the thing that's especially in the striking arts where there's not a very defined hierarchy structure.
Right.
That I can tell you numerous stories about people, because I generally look like I might be the B word, and I would go into gyms where no one knows me, and they would treat me like I was day one brand new, and there'd be some dude that had been training for I don't know, a few months that's
Right.
telling me what I'm doing wrong or whatever, and usually I'm pretty nice about it. I'll be like, oh, that's okay, cool, but yeah, that's hard. That's hard. I always try to explain to people maybe you shouldn't give people advice unless they're asking you for advice, even when your advice is probably good advice.
Correction is the lowest form of coaching, and one of the things I tend to look for if I'm trying to gauge someone's skill level is how they give feedback and how
Sure.
they like to coach. People who are kind of in the earlier stages love to kind of overwhelm with.
Yeah.
They like to repeat bits of information they have heard before.
I think also too, this is something I try to tell my younger coaches is I'll always yell triage, which is what is the most important thing that they need to work on right now.
Right.
And there's a tendency where it's okay, maybe stance has, maybe there's 15 points, important points in your stance. Where's your
Right.
left foot? Where's your right foot? Where's your right hand? Where's your left hand, right? Where are your shoulders? Where's your chin? What's your balance like? If I overwhelm somebody new with all of those ideas and I'm trying to make all of these corrections, first off, it's not going to be enjoyable for them. They're going to be like,
No.
wow, this is really awful. Two, they can't work, So I think younger coaches, they're trying to fix all these problems.
Right.
Where maybe if you're a more seasoned coach, it's well, what's the most important thing to me right now?
Step by step.
Yeah, let's see if we can nail one thing down. I might teach the whole thing, but then I'm only going to harp on one thing, that maybe that first session or 2 sessions or whatever. But that's hard. That's super hard. And then also some of coaching is opinion, because I have opinions on what I like, and maybe another coach might disagree with me completely. And the truth is that neither of those opinions are necessarily far superior than the other opinion. You know,
like I was saying, a lot of people who don't necessarily have particularly varied experience like to almost treat pieces of information they're given as being this holy esoteric truth. So they'll hear, you know, hands up or, you know, straight lines or whatever, and they'll take, again, this piece of information and they'll believe it applies in every single context.
sure.
And maybe people who are, maybe someone who's brand new, yeah, I want to make sure your hands are glued to your face at all times. Someone who's a little bit higher level, maybe they're able to play some other games with it.
Break some of the rules.
Break some
Right.
rules. Yeah.
Learn the rules before you break
Yeah,
them.
this is the thing that I try to harp with you guys a lot too, is like, you got to learn the rules. You have to understand the rules. You have to understand why we're doing the rules. And you have to then learn how to break them.
Right.
And that's one of the really frustrating things, I think, when newer athletes or newer students are coming in,
Mhm.
because they're watching very high level fighting.
Yeah.
You know, they're watching the highest level of fighting. They're watching the UFC. They're watching One Championship. They're watching Glory. And they're coming in and they're doing, like, they're changing leads and they're, you know, throwing these very advanced kicks or advanced setups.
John Jones does this.
Yeah, and they'll say, well, I saw this in the UFC. And I'd be like, okay, that's cool. I get that. But he's understanding when he can break those rules and you're not. So it's like, if I'm outside of range and I drop my hands and I'm playing a game or whatever, cool. You know, but if I'm inside of range and this guy's throwing like bombs on me and I'm dropping my hands, maybe not as safe, maybe not as good at an idea.
Right.
And I think that's the part about the culture where I think it's very hard, even for a guy, because when you come in, it's like one of the hardest things that I have to express to guys
Mhm.
is calm down, slow down, relax. I know that you're tough. That's not what I'm worried about.
Mhm.
I'm more concerned about whether or not you can do the technique. And early, when people are learning, it seems like, I say this a lot, that they have a light switch where they can either turn on the technique or turn the technique off, but they can't control the power of the technique. It's either
Mhm.
all the way on or all the way off. And then as you progress as a martial artist, you should be able to have those techniques on dimmer switches where you can turn the power up, you can turn the power down. I can put it on with no force. I can put it on with a lot of force. But that's hard because if you're going with someone that's brand new and they're kicking the hell out of you, maybe they don't know. That's often my thing, is that they just
Mhm.
don't understand that what they're doing is kind of like not great for, you know, them in the future, because they're going to have a bad reputation.
That's another really common faux pas, I think, is sparring etiquette is not always thoroughly discussed with people, and they get thrown into it. Sometimes they go way too hard, and they don't.
Well, that's
Maybe
also
they're intentionally being disrespectful, but they also might not.
They just don't know. They just don't
might
know.
genuinely think that.
that's also another coaching opinion too. This person should spar. This person should not spar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, I think
It's
that
kind of hard.
that's complicated, right? Is that when is the right time to get someone into sparring? You know, should they spar the first week? I don't know. I mean, we could argue a lot of things. But to Sammy's point, we don't really teach etiquette, you know, in the gym. Like, no one's coming in and saying, like, you know, hey, by the way, if you catch this guy's kick 10 times in a row and sweep him 10 times in a row,
Go to something else.
yeah, even though obviously you're developing mastery of the technique, and it's
Mhm.
cool that you've been able to catch his kick 10 times in a row, and it's cool that you were able to execute that sweep 10 times in a row, you're not building any friends right now by doing that same sweep over and over and over to a guy in a 2 or 3 minute round. But more often than not, most coaches are not going to talk about that with their fighters or their athletes or their newer students, really.
Mhm.
I don't know why that is. But it does seem very apparent that that's something that's not really talked about often. Looking back, what advice would you give your younger self when you were first entering the gym, or what changes would you like to make if you could go back in your training? What would you do differently, guys?
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give to myself in the earlier stages is that growing as a martial artist is not so much about collecting a bunch of different techniques as it is really refining your fundamentals and sharpening your tools.
Fair.
Which is really just monotonous repetition a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Not so much the fun, flashy stuff.
I hate to say this because, you know, I don't like bringing this person up, but, you know, that goes back to the Bruce Lee, like, you know, I don't care about a guy that knows 10,000 kicks. You know, I'm worried about the guy that's practiced one kick 10,000 times. So I think it's really, really fair. You know, it's like you're not a technique collector. You're trying to develop mastery of tools, and you don't necessarily need 300 tools, you know?
Right.
There's just no rush, right? If I could tell myself something back then, it's just there's no rush to do, like, again, a million things, right? Let me just master, like, just maybe, like, a few things.
To your point as well, I think a lot of guys come in, and it's like they're like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to have 10 fights this year, and next year I'm going to be a professional fighter. And it's like, well, do you have any fights? No. Have you trained before? No. All right, man. That's like wild. How about you just see if you can train for like one solid week and enjoy it? Because before you make the decision to be a professional level fighter, that's years in the process. Years in the process.
And exposure to it.
Yeah.
Just exposure to, like, even competition.
And understanding what that means. Because when you say, I want to be a professional fighter,
that's a life.
Maybe my first impression of what it is to be a professional fighter is living in the tough house, you know, training on TV on season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter. Maybe that's my first impression of that's maybe the first time I ever saw what a real professional MMA fighter did. And you know, I think hopefully our viewers know that being a professional mixed martial artist, professional fighter is not living in the Ultimate Fighter house and being, you know, Forrest Griffin shaving your head doing interviews. Like, that's not really what being a fighter is.
Right.
You know, I think, shout out to Juan Brea. I think one of the things Juan talks about a lot, one of our friends, I should say, is the grindy nature of training. You're coming in day after day, and just regardless of how you feel, you know, Costa motto, a professional does what needs to be done regardless of how they feel day after day. And I think that's the hard part, you know, is creating, again, that sustainable plan of what does sustainability look like.
I feel like also when people envision themselves as a professional fighter, they envision themselves beating up someone, right? They're the one throwing all the shots.
They envision gold and glory.
Right. They don't realize how many times you are going to get hit and injured throughout the game.
Yeah.
Not just inside the cage, but every single day of training.
Or they don't think about the next day.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
how great that feels when you win, and the next day when you can't walk.
Right.
You know, and like, you know, I think there's also this misunderstanding that being even a professional level fighter, you're not going to be rich. You know, like we were talking about this off the air about someone that's fighting, you know, it's a second or third pro fight. You know, a pro fighter fighting maybe their second or third fight, they could be making $400, $500, $600, $300 I've seen before. You know, there are some organizations that are paying their pro debut fighters maybe $1,000. I've heard of $1,500, but that's rare.
Someone's eyes just opened. They're
yeah.
Like, what?
You know, I mean, really though. I mean, like, you know, I was doing commentary a couple months ago, and it, you know, was a good show, but it's a local professional show. So the guys have a handful of pro fights. You know, maybe 1, 2, 3 pro fights, right? And I was saying that, you know, when you think about professional level athlete, you're thinking someone that, like, you know, they're getting paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year, where I know a lot of professional level fighters that, you know, they have a full-time job that has nothing to do with fighting. And then their second job is, you know, training either before work or after work, or in most cases, both before and after. And I think that is the thing that, you know, to speak to your point, is like, there's no rush, man. You need to come in and figure out if this is the right thing for you. Figure out how martial arts becomes a part of your life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, big time.
Why do people sometimes struggle when they come in? I don't know.
Struggle in what sense?
In the fact that it's like, I think that when people come in, sometimes they're struggling to fit in, and I see people make these really just big, like, I don't want to say mistakes, but they do like really like weird things, and then you just never see them again.
Well, people are drawn to fighting for a very wide variety of reasons, and some of them can get a little bit bizarre.
I'm trying to understand the context here. So, like, weird things as far as trying to fit in the culture, or
Sure. Like when people come in and they like, I don't know, they start to obsess about the coaches, or they just, I sometimes see people come in and they do things that are very like, man, would you do that if you were to sign up at like if you were to sign up for a tennis league, would you be doing like the same things that you're doing here? Is that just the nature of your personality, or are you doing weird things here because you're, I don't know, you're so, this environment's so foreign to what you expected? You know, I don't know.
Well, again, why are people drawn to fighting specifically? Out of all the things you could be spending your time doing, why did you decide I need to punch things, get punched back?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is a lot of people get into fighting from trauma.
Sure.
A lot of people get into fighting because maybe they have kind of an aggressive personality and they see it as an outlet. A lot of people are really drawn to the esotericism of it from movie and TVs and media.
Do you think that media in general, whether it's movies or if it's reality-based television or if it's the UFC, is painting an accurate picture of what, fighting is, or what being a martial artist is?
It absolutely does not, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. We were talking about how fighting is such a grindy game, and that's not super entertaining to watch. So
no one wants to see behind the scenes.
Right. When we watch the UFC and we see our favorite champion, beating someone up, it's a lot of us will project kind of our own fantasies onto that. We live in a society where violence can be very taboo, and this is one of the last outlets where, explicit violence is acceptable.
Sure.
So we share in the triumph of our favorite athletes. Like, oh yeah, I wish that, I could beat up this person in my life the same way that this superstar beat up this other athlete. Or we don't like, one of the fighters for some reason, and then we cheer and scream and we celebrate when we see them getting their face bashed in.
Yeah.
And we see these fighters a lot like these fictional characters. We sort of project this mythological,
they're not real
hero's journey onto it. Right. Again, we're projecting our own life circumstances onto it, much like we would a movie or a book or a television show.
I think with fighters, maybe more so than with other athletes, they come from a very relatable background.
Right.
So it's like sometimes when, I hate to say this, but when you're seeing some, baseball player that came from like a suburban, community, played baseball, and they went to a good high school and they played travel ball, and now they're playing in the I don't know, what is it? What is it?
The major leagues.
Major League Baseball, right. MLS. No. MLB. Sorry. Clearly I'm a sports guy. When they're playing in like Major League Baseball, you don't really recognize or identify with them. But when you're seeing someone that, grew up in a neighborhood like your neighborhood, and they a bullied kid that didn't really necessarily, have all the opportunities, because unfortunately, a lot of sports, especially in the United States now, they're expensive to get into, so like I know parents that are paying tons of money for their kids to play, Little League Baseball or, youth soccer, or youth, prep league football or flag football. With fighting, it's like most of the guys that get into fighting and the girls that get into fighting, it's like,
the barrier to entry is just low.
Yeah, low barrier to entry. I started training in a boxing gym, and one of the coaches liked me, and they taught me how to throw a jab, and Then I was always fighting on the streets, and then they were like, you should have a competition because we need to channel this in the right way, or like Mike Tyson was in, juvenile hall, and like, Costamato was like, hey man, we got to get you out of trouble because your life could be better. That's very easy to identify with, like
the adversity. Everyone's got adversity. Everyone's got their story.
And they're not necessarily coming out of, complete families.
Right. And then here's someone that's beating this adversity, and then you at home as a viewer says, that could be me.
Yeah.
Paul says all the time that fighting is an allegory for life.
That guy sounds smart.
That guy is smart.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that a lot of things that we face as fighters, I mean, like all of life is a fight, right? Like asking your boss for a raise, that's a fight. Going into work and dealing with, a customer at your job that's being difficult. In a way, that's a fight. You can't make it a physical one, but you need to churn the tide of that so that you end up, on a positive outcome. Roll with the punches, figure out how to make things go right. If you're trying to lose weight, that's a fight. If you're trying to fix some chronic condition, that's a fight. If you have a disease and you're in the hospital, that's a fight. Maybe a fight for your life. And I think the best of martial artists are able to use their training and become better human beings. Unfortunately, I think there's also a lot of coaches that aren't necessarily harnessing or encouraging the best of in people, where they if you have a guy that's super violent, or maybe I should say aggressive, initially that's a nice thing. I want an aggressive fighter. I want someone that pushes forward. That's an attribute that I find attractive in an athlete,
But he can't be toxic.
But it can't be toxic.
That goes back to reasons why people fight, and unfortunately there are people who are drawn to it, or they stick with it because they like the hierarchy. They like being at the top of the food chain.
Or they like hurting people.
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I wish that wasn't necessarily the case,
It's unfortunate because it's definitely the stereotype most people have of fighters. And I always try to argue that, well, it isn't everyone in the gym, and but it does exist.
I feel like the two kind of pervasive things that when people think of, maybe I should say the two negative things that people think about martial arts is, one is like that kind of toxicity of like, you go into this place that's very like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say douchey on the air, but very like male aggressive, machismo and people punching walls, and I don't want to date a guy that's into that because I don't want to some aggressive guy in my life. And then the complete opposite side of that coin is like what we named this episode over, which is like the McDojos, where they're using like these techniques that like they're harnessing their energy and throwing people across the room, and people are posting it on the internet going like, oh, look at these idiots doing martial arts.
A lot of people view martial arts as the path to enlightenment, which I've always thought was really interesting. I always think it's interesting why people seem to believe that it absolutely can be a spiritual journey. Again, life is a fight. And I think a lot of the lessons I learned in the gym, I'm able to apply outside of it. At the same time, I don't know if there is necessarily fulfillment to be found outside of the grind and being able to push through, if that makes sense. I think a lot of people have this idea that they're going to do some sort of special magical technique, and through then they're channeling their energy and becoming a better human being. But really, the reason I find fighting so humbling is there's nothing more real than, taking a hard punch to the face. And it's something that kind of always reminds me that there's always more work I have to be doing, and there's no final plateau of success or achievement in this. There's no mastery.
Yeah.
And people get lost in the idea of mastery being able to...
I want my black belt.
Like, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's been 4 months. Why don't I have my extra stripe? Like, dude, that stripe's not changing this journey for you in any way possible.
There's no end point.
No, I mean, like, look, I've been involved in martial arts for, like, you know, on and off for my entire life. So 40 years, you know, like there's so much stuff that I just don't even understand, that I just don't know. But on your point, like, I think that what is the path to enlightenment? You know, like, I'm not going to say that, like, that martial arts, you know, it leads to you being a more enlightened person. But what I do think is that when you do anything that's really difficult, if you do something that's really hard, day after day, week after week, month after month, and you learn how to challenge yourself, you learn how to push your limits, you get past your excuses, you know what it's like to work with people, the same people every day, doing this hard thing over and over and over again, and sometimes they don't, you know, you don't get along with them,
Right.
but you're a team and you got to make it work. And doing that thing day after day, month after month, I think should make you a better person.
Right.
As long as you don't get too much brain damage in the process.
I mean, plus this thing, martial arts, was here before me. It's going to be here after me.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere anytime soon. There's no end to it. And I think that's where, you know, I'm not trying to, I can't say that. I'm not trying to, like, mess with everyone's goals here. But, like, you know, the black belt isn't the end. Even those guys that have black belts, they're still learning. And the day that, like, you become a master and not a student is the day that, like,
yeah, you're not learning.
Yeah,
you gave up. I don't. I understand with kids why we, you know, like, oh, you know, I want you to call me this title, or you know, call me master, or call me, you know, sensei, or call me sifu, or call me professor. I understand that with kids. With adults, I don't necessarily always, like, I like to be called Paul. I like to be called Coach.
Cult leader.
Cult leader, yeah. You know, sometimes yeah, for sure. The monkey god go-go, if you will. But I don't know. I don't know how much of that is.
That's kind of like one of the cool things about jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You know, like, hey, my name is Rob. And that's it. You know, or everyone had their nickname, and that was that.
Yeah. I think that some jiu-jitsu programs are better about that than others, though, as well.
Yeah.
You know, because there's definitely been a lot of, like, I don't really want to go into this a lot, but there's problems in every community, you know, and I think that back to the enlightenment thing is, like, I think that you can use martial arts, you know, as that allegory where you're really facing real problems. Like, you know, Eddie Bravo says this thing about jiu-jitsu, that every time you tap, you're admitting that if you do not let go of this thing that you have, I will die, or whatever you have will break. And that for you to tap over and over and over again, you are accepting death. You are saying, okay, I died. Okay, I died. Okay, I died. And because of that, you become less afraid of death, and you become more aware of the fact that, you know, that you can't have an ego, because, you know, that this little guy could come in, this little girl could come in, and although she looks like, you know, that not imposing at all, this person is able to control you and really could kill you. I think that's very interesting, you know. But I've also seen martial arts be very devastating, where you have these cultures that are really, really toxic, and people are coming in and they know that it's a toxic culture.
Right.
Or maybe they start to discover that it's a toxic culture, but they don't know how to leave, or they don't know, like, when is it time to say, like, you know what, this is the wrong place for me.
One of my favorite McDojo stories is from when I was living in St. Paul, Minnesota. And there was this tiny little martial arts, like, studio, and a bunch of different programs would rent it out. And I went to this presentation that they had, and I will never forget, there was one guy trying to show off his kung fu school, and all they were doing was just kicking the shit out of each other as hard as they could. And I think they were breaking boards as well, but the instructor kicked one of his students in the face so hard his nose broke. There was like blood everywhere, and the poor student was not very happy.
Meanwhile, I'm the best. I showed you. I'm the greatest.
Toxic culture it's a lot of people enjoy the toxicity of it. It's this weird reflection of something deep within their psyche where they just want to seem cool and tough, and they really enjoy just hurting other people.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I think that's one of the biggest difference between the fake martial arts and the real martial arts, and what distinguishes someone who is being inauthentic from the real.
Because if somebody comes
threat.
into our school and it's apparent that they want to hurt people,
Right.
we try to either redirect that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think people come in and they don't realize that you're not supposed to go 100%.
Right.
Like, you're supposed to be working on learning the technique. And I always try to err on the side of they just don't understand.
Real martial arts are give and take.
Yeah, this is a cooperative journey.
Right.
And you might not be fighting ever, or you might fight maybe in 3 or 4 competitions this year, but it's not at the gym. Like, we're not fighting at the gym, we're training.
A lot of times you're just a dummy for another person to beat up.
I mean, I've been a dummy my whole life. I have a slew of ex-girlfriends that would attest to that.
But then you also have your weekend warrior.
Yeah.
Oh, our favorite.
I mean, and look, dude, those guys pay the bills. I'm not saying they don't. I just, I think everyone knows that I look, I got to be careful here. I don't want to get into dangerous territory. At the end of the day, I'm a therapist, right? Like, to me, that's the way I see it, is that people are coming to me because there's something missing in their life, whether it's physical health or mental health. And I am just trying to coach them to get them to where they need to be. And I don't want to turn anybody away. I want everybody to come in. I say this all the time. I want, I would like 1,000 people to come in, and I want everyone to have the improvements in their life that I had because of martial arts. I was afraid. I was a kid that was afraid. I was an adult that was afraid. I'm rarely afraid anymore. I have fears. Of course I have fears, right? But I don't, have a confrontation at work where maybe someone gets aggressive and I don't go, oh, man, I hope this guy doesn't try to hit me. Mm-hmm. No, I'm not wanting him to hit me either. I think anyone that's in martial arts a really long time has seen that violence is painful. I would like to never get into another fight in my life.
Aside from physical pain, it's just pain.
It's pain, dude. It's mental and physical, and it's intense, and no one gets out unscathed.
Right.
And I think that's maybe about some of these. I think that's one of the things about these gyms where you see these people that are training in these very impractical or very unrealistic ways. And as a martial artist, I think we see those and we go like, man, these people, what are they doing? Like, don't they realize what they're doing doesn't work, or that's not real? Mm-hmm. But it's also not painful. Although maybe temporarily, like, they're doing some weird lock or something where it kind of hurts. It's like if I'm training Thai boxing, and you're kicking me in the leg gently, and I'm kicking you in the leg gently, that's gonna hurt tomorrow. Like, it's gonna hurt a little bit, or when I check your kick, it's gonna hurt. Does it hurt like unbearable? No, but it's still gonna hurt. And when you're training in any type of real form of martial arts, there's gonna be discomfort. Well, even in jiu-jitsu, just the act of training jiu-jitsu, it's very intimate. It's very close. Mm-hmm. If that's something that's uncomfortable for you, you're gonna have to learn. What's the first thing that you learn in jiu-jitsu? How to be comfortable with someone very heavy on top of you. And you're in side control, and you have someone that's kind of breathing on you, and that it's hot. You have to learn how to get comfortable in uncomfortable positions.
Right.
And I think it's, again, goes back to life. You're not always going to be in comfortable situations. Mm-hmm. So if you can be comfortable in those moments and not awkward and not uncomfortable and not spazzy, that's going to make you, more successful. Like you see your ex on the train or something and you're like, oh, this is uncomfortable, but I'm used to being uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Been there, done that. You know what I mean? This can't
Right.
be worse than the dude that was breathing heavy on me 3 hours ago that was trying to,
The guy's sweating in my eye. and everything,
crush my
right.
windpipe, you
Right.
know?
Well, people also just think that, taking hits or being put in a submission is painful. But a lot of times executing the techniques yourselves can be really uncomfortable.
Sure.
Man, you throw a kick and it hits a shin. Brutal.
For sure.
Plenty of times when I've had someone in a submission in jiu-jitsu and like my leg will start spasming from some horrible nerve pain because they got their arm in one weird position.
I think one of the things about
No part of it is comfortable.
aging as a martial artist is that I have tapped out before in training due to my own body hurting
Yeah.
when I was the aggressor. When I was ahead and then my calf started to hurt and I was like, oh, let me tap out of that one. And they're like, whoa, why did you just tap? And I'm like, oh, my calf hurt.
It's a very real part of training.
Yeah, like, you have to know, like, oh, that my knee's doing something weird. Let me calm down for a second.
My pride steps in and just says, hurry up, rip it, and then
You'll never be allowed in class again.
Cool, he tapped. All right, hey, man, by the way, you almost had me. What do you mean? I'll tell you later.
Tap out due to calf pain.
Due to my calf.
I had a calf cramp. Yeah, I don't know, man. I look at who I was before martial arts as an adult, and I look at who I am now, and I think that, martial arts was this great love of my life, and I've found a way. I'm very lucky because I found a way to do this game, for my life as a career. But, it's at the end of the day, it's a job. There's days where I'm like, I'm tired, or I feel like I put a lot of energy into somebody and then they decided they were going to quit. And that can be very,
or go to another school.
Yeah,
Right.
and look, and I say this all the time, dude, you got to know
When to go.
and I hate to say that, but if you're training at a school where you're not getting what you need to evaluate what that is. Now, look, if you are a competitive athlete and you're at a school and you can't win, but everyone around you is winning, that might be you. That might be you. We need to look at why you're not winning and everyone else is. But if you're at a school where you're trying to be a competitive athlete and everyone around you is also losing,
think about it. Look at it.
Yeah, what's the deal? Why is that happening? And I hate that. I absolutely hate that because I don't want anybody to leave.
Right.
I'm trying to build a cult here, like I'm trying to build 1,000 students, I'm trying to build this world-class program. I want 1 million people to follow us on Combat Theory and tune into our podcast wherever podcasts are found. But I don't know. I think something that happens is that you train at some school for a really long time and you're really loyal to your instructor and you start to realize like, oh man, maybe this system that I learned, maybe it doesn't work.
Do you think that happens to even the McDojos where it's like, oh man, this guy is not real, but I love this guy?
Yeah.
I think there are, two pieces to it. And one of them is we develop such a unique bond with the people we train with. And it's very hard to explain to people who aren't part of the culture. You might not necessarily be friends with everyone, but you have a really deep respect after you bleed and sweat all over each other for years.
Got you sweat my eyeballs.
It is a different relationship of which you develop.
Yeah, last time I left the gym I was at for a few years, it was worse to tell the coach than like going through a breakup. I recalled him crying, telling him I wasn't going to come back to the gym.
And then you found me.
And now
you'll leave me soon too. But I think that is back to like the McDojo thing. I think that how do you know what you're learning is legitimate? Like, but listen, if this is my go-to. Let's say I meet a girl and she speaks French. And she's like, man, I really want to teach you French. And, we fall in love, we date, we're living in Orlando, Florida. And, when we're in the house, she's teaching me French, words like, I don't know any French words, so I can't even give you an example.
Right.
So she's teaching me French. And, every once in a while, like maybe I'll watch like a French movie or something with subtitles on, and the subtitles help, and I kind of get it. And I'm like, oh, I'm learning French. Like, this is crazy, I'm getting it. I'm totally getting it. I'm getting better. I'm having conversations with her, and she understands me, and I understand her. And then, we we break up. And then, I'm like, you know what, man, I'm going to France. I'm going to go, talk to some French people. And I go to France, and, man, she wasn't teaching me French. She was teaching me like
her version
of French, or she was teaching me some other language entirely that she knew. And, when we were watching movies, they weren't even movies in French, that's a rude awakening, but when it comes to martial arts, because although most people that are training martial arts are not competing, okay, because when you're competing,
you're exposed
to a bunch of gyms.
Yep.
So like Sammy has competed, but Sammy also works as a ring girl, right? So when Sammy's working as a ring girl, she's exposed to all of these gyms, and she's ringside, so she gets to see, oh, this is how one gym competes versus this is how another gym competes versus this is the way the coaches are interacting with the people around them.
This is their vernacular.
Yeah.
When I'm a ring girl, I take notes on all the fights, and I take notes on all the coaches as well. This is a fun fact for everyone listening.
Now you're feeling really judged, aren't you, coaches?
Yeah, like people always make jokes about like, oh, what's in your notes app? It's commentary on other gyms. But I look at patterns between fighters from certain gyms. I look at the strategy of the coaches in the corner. What kind of the verbiage they're using, how are they interacting with the team around them.
Did they or did they not smack Demarian in the face? Sorry, Demarian. Sorry, Johnny Davis.
Patterns of what are fatal mistakes people are making in training, and is that a personal issue? Is that going to be consistent throughout everyone in a certain team?
Yeah. And I think as a coach, I'm doing the same thing, right? Like as a coach that goes to fights, that judges fights,
right?
I'm doing that same thing where I'm like saying like, oh, everybody from so and so gym, this style, they have trouble doing this, or opposite of that, everyone from this gym is really good at this. There's certain gyms that I could say, oh, every guy out of this gym, every girl out of this gym, they're going to be super athletic,
right?
So if we don't beat them in technique, they're going to beat us in conditioning alone, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that is the case when you're competing or you're around competitions. But the vast majority of our students, the vast majority of people that do martial arts are not competing.
Right. They don't have that feedback.
Yeah, they don't have that feedback. So what happens when you go to some martial arts school that like these martial arts schools that get clowned on the internet, and you're training for maybe a couple of years, and you've invested a lot of energy in this, a lot of money,
right?
And you learned all these great techniques, and anything works against someone that knows nothing. So when you're friends, they're like, "Oh, show me what you're learning," and you show them some lock or something, and they're like, "Oh my god, that's so crazy!
Dude, it's an awesome magic trick."
Yeah, you know what I mean. But they don't know because they're not training either. And then one day they're confronted by the fact that like this thing that I just learned doesn't work. And by the way, students, your coach has this amazing out. Okay, because if you come back to me and you're like, yo, man, that thing you taught me didn't work, what can I say?
You didn't drill it enough.
Maybe you didn't drill it enough. Oh, maybe you didn't do it right.
This is why it didn't work.
Yeah, this is why it didn't work.
Show me what
show me what you did. And then I can, if I'm a skilled coach or whatever, con artist,
right? I
can say like, oh, you should have done this. And they're like, oh, man, I wish I would have known that. Hopefully I don't get mugged again.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think this is something that I struggle with. How do we qualify training across the board so that when someone walks into a school, they know this is a great, this is a great program or this is a terrible program.
When the guy gives you the okay to leave, right?
Okay.
Right? Where it's like, hey, man, if this doesn't work for you, you need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm not the source.
Right.
I'm not the source.
Right.
There are different answers for this, though, depending on the level of the athlete. Being able to self-troubleshoot is a high-level skill. So people in their first, year, 2-3 years of training, they might not be able to see a lot of very obvious problems versus, taking someone who's kind of better on the block, been training for a decade. If they're scouting out new gyms, there's very different things they're probably have to look for.
Which the thing I appreciate us doing is like the sparring invitational. Hey,
Yeah.
Bring this gym in, bring this gym in, bring this gym in.
We're a very open gym.
Yeah.
Yeah. But look, there's pros and cons to that.
Absolutely.
I like.
Don't show your hand, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So we, for those that are listening that don't train with us, we're pretty open. I like coaches and fighters to come in and athletes, martial artists to come in and train with us from other schools and stuff. Pros and cons. I believe in what we're doing. I believe in the coaching. I believe in the system. I believe in the gym. So I'm not worried that another coach is going to come in and steal students. Or if another coach comes in and connects with a student in a way that I don't, maybe that is a good opportunity for them to get better training or whatever. So we do have a lot of events where we do cross training, I encourage my team to do a lot of workshops and a lot of seminars and to if Liam Harrison's coming to town, like, hey, let's go check out Liam Harrison. I'm not a Liam Harrison disciple, but I respect him and I think that he's amazing. You can't argue that he's amazing.
And you expose us and you're okay with us getting exposed to different perspectives.
Yeah.
Right.
But also at the end of the day, I'm hoping to build this world-class team. So we'll have link notes. We'll have show notes and the links below. If you want to buy a Combat Theory shirt or if you want to follow any of us on Instagram or TikTok, it helps more than you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
So we are about a little over an hour in. So here's my questions.
Mm-hmm.
What are your final thoughts? What would you like to say about this subject? Episode 1. We'll go back years from now and we'll watch this and we'll be like, this was terrible.
This subject never ends, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much more I want to play off of, but maybe we could have a whole new episode.
Whole nother episode on that.
The samurai, the ronin, and the ninja.
Yes.
Finding your place in the
yes.
gym. And,
Who are you? Who are you?
The conversation of how do we deduce if the gym is legitimate or not goes beyond, is it a quality gym, but also is it a good fit for me as an individual? And there are so many factors that come into play. How do I connect with the coaches? Do I have sparring partners who are kind of appropriate skill level and size for me? Is it near me? Is the schedule sustainable for me? What is the type of training?
Is it pushing me?
Right.
Yeah. I think,
Or are they pushing me past my limits? Or are we pushing through, or are we pushing past?
Are they being honest with me?
Right.
I think sometimes I see guys that, they don't want honesty,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll go train with people that are going to tell them how great they are instead of being open and honest about their limitations.
Right.
Which, hey man, everybody wants a cheerleader. I do too.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for somebody sometimes to be like, Paul, you're doing great. You just keep pushing forward. There's days where I doubt myself like everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as a team, I try to build people up, but a great coach is going to be really honest with you. And if you're making mistakes, they're going to tell you. And sometimes I think that's hard to hear, hard to see. I'll shout out your friend. I watch a lot of videos. I watch a lot of instructional stuff. I watch a lot of opinion stuff. I listen to a lot of podcasts, which is kind of why we decided to do the podcast. But I watched a TikTok with CalcuKate where she was saying that that the canary in the coal mine on programs sometimes is how many girls do they have. If you walk into the gym and you see a lot of girls, that could be a really positive sign. Like there's a lot of good coaching going on here, and this is a good environment.
Safe environment.
Safe environment. But I'll be honest with you. I also know guys that don't like training with girls. Or I know
Yeah.
guys that feel like they don't want there to be girls at the gym.
I have also had the personal experience where as a female athlete, I feel like a lot of coaches will just kiss my ass. And
Yeah.
part of the reason for it is they know that having more girls in the program makes them look good. So I've actually had a lot of gyms offer me, heavily discounted
Or train for free or whatnot.
free training and purely for their own image. But these are also not people who are serious about helping me get better.
Yeah.
These are people who are investing in me to boost their own image.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I ended up at OBJJ and why I've kind of stuck around with combat theory is I remember telling Paul after one of my first sparring sessions at the gym, I was like, you're one of the first coaches that has really criticized me.
And it's continued ever since.
It's been nonstop, but it also means that you're serious about seeing me, wanting to see me grow.
Yeah. I mean, there's a fine line here because I think that absolutely when people come into the gym, I'm going to encourage them. And sometimes that it does mean that I'm going to give them, I don't want to say free. Nothing in this world is free.
Right.
So to me, it's like if I have somebody come in and I'm like, hey, let's spend 30 minutes and let's do mitts, or like, let's work on something before or after class.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is not free. Maybe I'm not charging you for that, but I always try to tell my athletes and my students and, like you have to pay it back because to me, the most important thing is the program, right? For me as a coach, the most important thing to me in my life is the building and the quality of our program. The reason that I created, combat theory and the reason that I've been trying to build the program is because I want martial arts to have the same effect on my life, or on other people's lives as it had on my life. But yeah, I think that, it's true. There's a lot of coaches out there that, again, I really firmly believe this. Nothing in this world is free.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're walking into somewhere and they're offering you, free training, or they're, giving you something for free, I mean, there's something that comes along with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And maybe it's honorable, and it's I expect you to perform,
Right.
and
Expect you to be the coach today.
Yeah.
Expect you to work with this athlete. in
yeah,
exchange for some free
or
training.
hey, I expect you to have a positive attitude, because like, look, dude, sometimes just having people in the gym that are happy and excited to be there,
Mm-hmm.
good for me, because it's a grindy game, man.
Yeah.
So if I'm teaching, 6 days a week, I want personalities that are going to be like uplifting and entertaining and making me feel, happy,
Enjoyable to be around.
Yeah, it's because it's hard to love the redundancies of like throwing a jab 1,000 times.
Yeah, you know what I
man.
mean?
But
Like,
it's part of it, and you need it.
you're not going to get better if you don't do it.
Right. But like, hey, man, he's happy he's here too. Maybe I ought to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like, there's a lot to be said about that,
Yeah.
Robert. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think that also kind of answers the question of what do you look for in a quality gym? And a lot of it is that really monotone repetition of fundamentals. The gyms that get really lost on the flashy stuff
Yeah.
Yeah.
and overlook the fundamentals tend to be the ones I recommend steering away from.
I think that as a coach, as an instructor, I've said this for many, many years. There's this weird balancing act between I want to be a rock star, like I want to entertain you. I want to show you all of these amazing techniques, and every time you come to class, I'm going to show you like 50 things. Versus I'm going to be a world-class coach, instructor, and I'm going to have you rep the same thing for 60 minutes.
Over again.
Yeah.
And you're going to hate me after 60 minutes because you just threw 250 jabs, in 7 different ways. Like, oh, I hit the jab on the back. Oh, I hit the jab on mitts. I hit the jab with a person. Oh, I hit the jab in the air. And it's like, man, I'm already great at the jab. I don't need to throw 250 more jabs because my jab's unstoppable.
And that's where I come up right behind you.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's my thing. Like, I think that's a weird thing. I think new coaches do that too, and new instructors, where they're just trying to show you all these cool things because they love it and they're excited about it and they want They want to pass that excitement and love on to you. They finally got the opportunity to do what they love, maybe get paid for it. Or let's be honest, maybe just get free gym membership if they teach. And they're so excited to show you all of these cool techniques that, they're getting lost in the sauce. Like we're I think, man, I think there's something to be said about, I saw Greg Nelson talk about this, and he was saying that, doing one technique for 60 minutes, every rep, you try to make it a little bit better. There's something really valuable about that.
Our ability to fight isn't inside our minds, it's inside our nervous system.
Yeah.
And we can only develop that through repetition.
Yeah. Muscle memory. Yeah.
Really common mistake people make is they don't necessarily know how to learn how to fight. They think of learning as like going through a textbook and memorizing facts. Okay, I know what a jab is. I know I have to throw it straight. Okay, I know what an armbar is. I know what a roundhouse kick is. But it doesn't matter if you know what they are. It's, are you able to do them? Are
efficiently?
Efficiently. Can you throw them off at the correct moment? From the correct range?
I think you and I were having this conversation the other day.
Yes.
Where I was saying that it's weird because as a populace, I think we're more educated about martial arts than ever before.
Right.
So some guy comes in the gym today and he's like, "Oh yeah, man, I was in this bar brawl. I did a double leg takedown and I passed a side control and I did an arm bar and then I submitted him."
Right.
And all of those things, all of those words are real. They all mean something, okay? But just because you've seen a double leg takedown on television, or you've seen a roundhouse kick, or you've seen a teep, doesn't mean that you can proficiently throw them, and it certainly doesn't mean that you know when to use them.
There are levels of correctness as well.
Yeah. But today more than ever, like admittedly, when I walked into a karate school, I had no idea, what any of that stuff was. But now because of movies, because of television, because of, the UFC, people know that stuff much, much better. Like I've said this story before where I've seen people that I've worked in a lot of like kind of rough locations in my life. And I've seen guys that like try to do a double leg takedown. Worst double leg takedown you've ever seen in your life. But like in a street fight, try to do a double leg takedown. And then as they're getting arrested, you're like, "Yo, man, like, where did you learn that?" And like, "Yo, man, I saw it on TV, brah." And you're like, "Oh, that's why it was so bad." They never tried it before, but they had decided that in that moment, after some liquid courage,
They were exposed to it.
it was double leg takedown city, brah.
Yep.
So it's weird because we're both in this more populated, more educated populace, and there's more schools than ever before. But yeah, man, people don't understand the grindy nature of
like this lifestyle.
what really training really is. And oh, by the way, I understand that everything hurts. You still got to come back tomorrow and do it again.
You have to be very comfortable always being in pain. Permanently injured.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had a non-fractured toe in like 6 months.
I remember in my 20s, we were probably training too hard sometimes. We were sparring too hard. But I remember I was in my 20s, and I was telling someone, like, my head just hurts all the time. And they're like, "Yeah, take Advil."
Right.
And I was like, "Oh, okay. All right, cool. Yeah. That's solid advice." Like, I thought they were going to say, like, "Oh, man, you should do this instead," or like, "Don't get hit in the head as much," or whatever. He was like, "No, man, you should be taking Advil. You'll get used to it."
Yeah.
That to me was like really like, what?
Yeah, take 4 or leave.
Yeah, and then my dumbass thought like,
okay, it's just what you
that
do.
sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. It's
I mean, look, for a big part of my 20s, I was like 4 Advil every 6 hours. Like, I'm surprised I'm alive right now, which some of the people listening at home are also surprised I'm alive right now. All right, guys. Thank you for being on the very first episode of the Combat Theory Presents podcast. Hopefully, you're going to be listening to this regularly, weekly, for at least the first season. We're going to try to do 1 episode a week, wherever podcasts are found. If you were watching at home via YouTube, then you saw the video and the audio, or maybe you're perhaps watching on Spotify or Apple. and you're getting just the audio. Either way, we thank you guys so much. That's all from Paul. Sammy?
Unfortunately, there's more where this comes from.
Did you have fun?
I did have fun. I hope you all had fun.
I don't know. Rob, did you have fun?
Yeah, man, it was great.
Way past your bedtime.
Way past bedtime. I'm like fading in and out of consciousness. Plug the store YouTube channel. They're watching on YouTube, but
yeah, guys, go ahead and buy
stuff.
yourself a Combat Theory shirt. Rep it wherever you want to rep your Combat Theory shirts at. We have an entire merchandise line. We have a women's line. We have all of that cool stuff. Also, hey, if you want to sponsor us and you listen to the whole hour of the episode, more than an hour now, hey, log in, man. Send us an email. We'll take it. We love it. We'll sponsor anything.
Olive Garden.
The Olive Garden. What's up, the Olive Garden? We love you. We eat every fight. We go to the Olive Garden.
Yeah, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe on YouTube, and also give us a follow on our social media. It helps out more than you know.
Yes. All right, guys. Thank you so very, very much.